Dust off those old recipe boxes hidden in your attic. They hold secrets your grandparents never talked about. These forgotten recipes tell stories of hard times when families stretched every penny and used creativity to fight hunger. Today, we journey through 25 needy man meals that fed generations during the Great Depression, wartime rationing, and economic struggles. Milk toast. Start your morning like a 1930s coal miner's kid. Milk toast sounds fancy, but it was pure survival breakfast. During the Great Depression, families across Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Kentucky served this to children and sick relatives because it was gentle on the stomach and stretched ingredients further than almost anything else. Take yesterday's bread. Stale was better because it soaked up liquid without disintegrating. Toast it dark over a wood stove until it developed a deep, almost burnt crust. Break it into chunks in a bowl. Heat milk in a saucepan until it just started steaming. Then pour that hot milk over the toasted bread. Add a tiny pat of butter if you had it, maybe a pinch of salt or sugar. The bread swelled up into something warm and filling that hit your empty stomach like comfort itself. Factory workers ate this before 12-hour shifts. Kids ate it before walking 3 miles to school. It was the original comfort food that cost almost nothing, but kept entire families moving through another hard day. Sugar sandwich. 2 slices of white bread, butter if you were lucky, and granulated sugar. That's it. That's the meal that millions of American children remember as their after-school snack during the Depression and into the 1950s. In tenement buildings across New York, Chicago, and Detroit, mothers made these because sugar was cheap, bread was rationed carefully, and kids needed something sweet to forget they were hungry. You'd butter the bread thin, just enough to make the sugar stick. Sprinkle white sugar generously over one slice, press the other slice on top, and you had yourself a treat. The sugar crunched between your teeth, mixed with the soft bread, and gave you a quick burst of energy. Kids traded them at school, ate them while doing homework at kitchen tables lit by single bulbs, shared them with siblings who were too young to remember better times. It wasn't nutritious, but it was a moment of sweetness in a bitter world. Some families used brown sugar when white ran out, creating a molasses-like flavor. Today's fancy salted caramel. This was the working man's version. Fried cornmeal mush. Before instant oatmeal, before breakfast cereals lined grocery store shelves, there was cornmeal mush, the breakfast that built the American South and kept Depression-era families going through the hardest mornings. Appalachian families, sharecroppers in Mississippi, and factory workers in industrial towns ate this religiously. You'd make a thick cornmeal porridge the night before, boil water with salt, whisk in yellow cornmeal until it thickened into a dense, grainy mass that could stand a spoon upright. Pour it into a loaf pan and let it set overnight in the icebox or on a cold windowsill. By morning, it was solid as cheese. Slice it thick, like bread, and fry those slabs in whatever fat you had. Bacon grease if you were fortunate. Lard more commonly. Sometimes, just a film of butter. The outside turned golden and crispy, with a satisfying crunch, while the inside stayed creamy and warm. Serve it with a drizzle of molasses or sorghum syrup, maybe some butter melting on top. It stuck to your ribs for hours, fueled hard labor, and used the cheapest ingredient in America, cornmeal. Fried hominy. Take dried corn kernels, soak them in lye water until the hulls fell off, and you had hominy, one of the most versatile survival foods Native Americans taught to settlers. By the Depression, fried hominy had become a staple breakfast across the South and Midwest. You could buy canned hominy for pennies, drain it, and fry it in a cast-iron skillet with a little bacon grease or lard. The kernels puffed up and got crispy on the outside while staying soft and chewy inside, with a distinctive earthy, slightly tangy flavor that tasted nothing like fresh corn. In Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee, working families ate this alongside eggs when they had them, or just by itself with salt and pepper when they didn't. It was filling, cheap, and lasted forever in the pantry. You could make it savory with onions and peppers, or slightly sweet with a touch of butter and salt. Factory workers packed cold fried hominy in lunch pails. Farmers ate it before dawn and worked until sunset on its slow-burning energy. It's the ancestor of modern grits, but heartier, chewier, and more substantial. Lard sandwiches. Here's where we separate the curious from the squeamish. Lard sandwiches were dead serious meals for working-class families from the 1930s through the 1950s, especially in German, Polish, and Eastern European immigrant communities. When meat was unaffordable and butter was reserved for special occasions, lard was the fat that kept people alive. Miners in Pennsylvania, steelworkers in Pittsburgh, and meatpacking workers in Chicago ate these for lunch. Take 2 thick slices of rye or white bread. Spread them with cold lard straight from the can. Not a thin smear, but a proper 1/4-inch layer. Sprinkle with coarse salt. Maybe some black pepper if you had it. Some families added sliced onions. Others, a sprinkle of paprika. The lard was smooth, rich, and surprisingly mild, with a clean pork flavor that wasn't greasy or overwhelming. It was pure calories, the fuel you needed for 10-hour shifts in dangerous conditions. Packed in a tin lunch pail, it stayed fresh in all weather. Men ate these in factory break rooms, on construction sites, in coal mine shafts. Was it healthy by today's standards? No. Did it keep your family fed when nothing else was affordable? Absolutely. Corn Dodgers. If cornbread had a scrappier, tougher cousin, it'd be corn Dodgers. These dense, unleavened corn cakes fed Confederate soldiers during the Civil War and never really left the Southern table. During the Depression, they made a comeback because they required almost nothing: cornmeal, water, salt, and heat. Mix coarse cornmeal with just enough water to form a thick paste that held together. Shape it into small, flat ovals with your hands, hence Dodgers, like dodging enemy fire while eating. Fry them in a cast iron skillet with minimal grease, or bake them directly on the hot surface of a wood stove. They came out hard, crispy on the outside, and dense as hockey pucks inside. You had to have strong teeth and patience. Dunk them in pot liquor, soak them in milk, or eat them alongside beans where they'd soften in the liquid. Kentucky, Tennessee, and Arkansas families made dozens at a time because they lasted for days without spoiling. Farmers packed them for field work. Kids gnawed on them as snacks. They weren't pretty. They weren't soft, but they were survival. Pure, simple, and effective. Grits with butter and salt. When people say Southern comfort food, they're talking about grits, but not the creamy, cheese-laden restaurant version. Depression-era grits were simple. Coarsely ground corn cooked in water until thick, served with a small pat of butter and a generous shake of salt. That's it. From Mississippi to South Carolina, this was breakfast, lunch, sometimes dinner. The beauty was in its versatility and cost. A bag of grits was cheaper than almost any other food and could feed a family for a week. Boil water, slowly whisk in the grits to avoid lumps, and stir constantly for 20 minutes while they absorbed liquid and softened into a thick, creamy porridge. The texture was grainy but smooth, with a subtle corn sweetness that the butter enhanced and the salt balanced perfectly. Sharecroppers ate this before dawn. Mill workers ate it cold for lunch. Children ate it for dinner when nothing else was available. You could stretch it by adding more water, making it thinner but still filling. You could pair it with anything: fried fish, collard greens, beans, or nothing at all. It was the foundation of Southern poverty cooking, and today's fancy shrimp and grits owes everything to this humble bowl. Poverty pudding. Don't let the name fool you. Poverty pudding was dessert, breakfast, and sometimes dinner, all rolled into one resourceful dish. During the Depression, families across America made this simple baked concoction from stale bread, milk, eggs if they had them, and whatever sweetener they could afford. It was English bread pudding's struggling American cousin. Tear up old bread into chunks. The stalest bread worked best because it soaked up liquid without falling apart. Pour over whatever milk you had, even watered down evaporated milk. Add a beaten egg if you were fortunate, sugar or molasses for sweetness, maybe a dash of vanilla extract or cinnamon if your pantry held such luxuries. Mix it all together and bake it in a greased pan until the top turned golden and slightly crispy, while the inside stayed custardy and soft. The result was warm, sweet, and filling. A dish that transformed garbage into something that actually felt like a treat. Children loved it because it tasted like dessert. Adults appreciated it because it used every last scrap of bread that would otherwise go to waste. In the Midwest, they added raisins when fruit was available. In the South, they used sorghum instead of sugar. It was poverty cooking at its most ingenious. Government cheese sandwiches. If you grew up poor in America during the 1960s through 1990s, you remember government cheese. The USDA distributed massive 5-pound blocks of processed cheese to low-income families through welfare programs, and that cheese became the foundation of countless meals. It wasn't fancy, bright orange, dense, slightly rubbery, with a mild, salty flavor that melted into greasy perfection. Kids in subsidized housing projects, families on food stamps, and anyone receiving government assistance knew this cheese intimately. You'd slice it thick between white bread, sometimes toasted, often not because electricity cost money. The cheese was so dense that, even at room temperature, it held its shape, never crumbling or breaking. When you did toast it, it melted into a gooey, stretchy layer that stuck to the roof of your mouth. It tasted like survival, like making it through another month, like the government's acknowledgement that you existed. Was it gourmet? Absolutely not. But paired with cheap white bread and maybe some margarine, it was lunch, dinner, a midnight snack. Millions of American children survived on these sandwiches, packed them in paper bags for school, ate them while watching afternoon cartoons on secondhand TVs. Ketchup sandwiches. When the pantry was completely bare except for condiments, American families turned to ketchup sandwiches, the most controversial meal on this list. During the worst years of the Depression and into the 1950s in poor urban areas, parents made these for children who were crying from hunger. 2 slices of white bread, a thick smear of tomato ketchup, and nothing else. The sweetness of the ketchup, its tomato tang, and the slight vinegar bite gave the sandwich some flavor, some substance, something that wasn't just plain bread. Kids in Chicago tenements, Detroit housing projects, and rural Appalachian towns ate these. Was it nutrition? Not really. Mostly sugar, salt, and bread. But it was red. It looked like there was something between those bread slices, and psychologically, it felt more like a meal than plain bread alone. Some families upgraded it with a slice of government cheese when available. Others added margarine to make it richer. The ketchup soaked into the bread, making it slightly soggy, but more palatable. Food historians consider it one of the starkest symbols of American poverty, when the only vegetable you could afford came in a bottle as a condiment. Yet, people survived on it, and some even developed a nostalgic taste for it. Tripe and onions. Now we're getting into organ meat territory, the parts of animals that rich folks threw away, but poor families turned into supper. Tripe is cow stomach lining, and before it became a trendy ingredient in fancy restaurants, it fed working-class families across America and Europe for centuries. Italian, Irish, and Eastern European immigrants brought their tripe recipes to industrial American cities, and during the Depression, it became a staple because butchers practically gave it away. The preparation wasn't for the faint of heart. Clean the tripe thoroughly. Boil it for hours until tender. We're talking 3 to 4 hours of simmering to break down the tough, rubbery texture. Slice it into strips, then sauté it with onions. Lots of onions, because onions were cheap and their sweetness balanced tripe's distinctive, slightly funky flavor. Add black pepper, salt, maybe some vinegar or tomato sauce if you had it. The final dish was tender, savory, and surprisingly rich. The onions caramelized into sweetness. The tripe absorbed all the flavors. And you had a protein-rich meal that cost pennies. Philadelphia, New York, and Chicago had entire neighborhoods where tripe and onions was Friday dinner. It stuck to your ribs, gave you the protein factory work demanded. Vienna, sausages and crackers. Open a can, grab a sleeve of saltine crackers, and you had lunch. Vienna sausages, those pale, soft, slightly mysterious little sausages packed in salty water, were the ultimate convenience food for poor families from the 1940s through the 1980s. They required no cooking, no refrigeration before opening, and cost less than $1 for a can that could feed 2 people if you stretched it. Construction workers, farmers during harvest, and kids home alone after school ate these religiously. You'd open the can with that little pull-tab key, drain the slightly gelatinous liquid, and eat the sausages straight from the can, or placed carefully on crackers like you were serving hors d'oeuvres at a fancy party. The sausages were soft, salty, with a vaguely meaty flavor that tasted more like salt and smoke than actual meat. The texture was smooth, almost creamy, nothing like a proper sausage. But paired with crispy saltine crackers, maybe a squirt of mustard if you were feeling fancy, it became a complete meal. Truck drivers ate these in their cabs. Factory workers ate them in break rooms. Deviled ham sandwiches. Before fancy artisan sandwiches, there was deviled ham. That mysterious, pink, spreadable meat paste that came in small cans with a little devil logo. During the Depression through the 1960s, Underwood deviled ham was a staple in working-class households because one small can could make 3 or 4 sandwiches. The ham was ground so fine, it was almost a paste, mixed with spices, salt, and just enough fat to make it spreadable. It had a distinctive spiced flavor, peppery, slightly smoky, definitely processed, but not unpleasant. You'd spread it thick on white bread, sometimes adding a thin layer of mayonnaise or mustard if your budget allowed. The sandwich was salty, rich, and surprisingly satisfying despite being mostly mystery meat. Kids took these to school in wax paper wrapping. Factory workers ate them cold from lunch pails. The beauty was in the shelf stability. Canned deviled ham lasted forever in the pantry, required no refrigeration, and could be ready in 30 seconds. In the South, some families mixed it with pickle relish. In the Midwest, they added a slice of cheese. It wasn't real ham, not by a long shot, but it was protein, it was flavorful, and it kept families fed. Fried cabbage and onions. When vegetables cost too much, cabbage saved the day. A single head of cabbage cost pennies during the Depression, fed an entire family, and lasted a week in the icebox. Fried cabbage and onions became a staple across America, from German communities in the Midwest to Irish neighborhoods in Boston to Southern families stretching their grocery money. Take half a head of cabbage, slice it into thick strips, slice an onion or 2. Heat up your cast iron skillet with bacon grease, lard, or whatever fat you had saved. Throw in the onions first. Let them soften and caramelize until they turned golden and sweet. Add the cabbage, stirring frequently as it wilted down and developed crispy, browned edges. Season with salt, pepper, maybe a splash of vinegar for tang. The cabbage cooked down to a fraction of its original volume, becoming sweet, savory, and slightly caramelized. Those crispy edges added texture, the onions added depth, and the whole dish smelled incredible. Like comfort, like making something from nothing. You could eat it as a side dish with beans, or just eat a bowl of it by itself with cornbread. It was filling, actually nutritious with vitamin C, and stretched further than almost any other vegetable. Potato soup, water-based. Forget cream-based potato soup. Depression-era potato soup was made with water, potatoes, and hope. Across rural America and in urban tenements, families made this when there was literally nothing else. Peel potatoes, however many you had, and dice them into chunks. Boil them in salted water until they started to break down and thicken the liquid naturally. Some families added a bit of flour to make it thicker. If you were fortunate, you had an onion to add flavor. If you were really fortunate, you had a small amount of milk or cream to finish it. But most times, it was just potatoes and water. The result was a thin, starchy soup that filled your stomach and provided enough calories to get through the day. The potatoes broke down into the broth, creating a slightly creamy texture, even without any dairy. Season it heavily with salt and pepper. Sometimes, that's all you had to make it taste like something. Families ate this for dinner multiple nights a week. You'd serve it with whatever bread you had, using the bread to soak up every last drop. It was humble. It was plain. But it was warm food in your belly when the alternative was going to bed hungry. Potted meat sandwiches. Potted meat was the ultimate mystery meat. A canned paste that could have been any combination of beef, pork, chicken, or mechanically separated protein, ground so fine you'd never know its origins. During lean times, one small can of potted meat made 2 sandwiches for about 15 cents total. The meat came out of the can with a distinct squish, formed into a loaf shape that held the can's ridges. It was pale pink or grayish, with a texture like thick pâté and a salty, vaguely meaty flavor, boosted by generous amounts of spices to mask whatever was actually in there. Spread it thick on white bread. That's all you needed. The richness of the meat paste meant you didn't need butter or mayonnaise, though some people added mustard for bite. Construction workers, day laborers, and kids whose parents worked 2 jobs ate these regularly. The sandwiches were heavy, dense, and filling in a way that 2 slices of bread alone could never be. You could eat one at noon and still feel full at 3 o'clock. Was it quality meat? Absolutely not. Was it meat-adjacent protein that kept working families going? Without question. Today, potted meat is considered barely food, but for millions of Americans, it was survival in a can. Pork neck bones and rice. Southern families knew what butchers threw away could make the best meals. Pork neck bones were the scraps left after better cuts were sold, available for almost nothing at black-owned butcher shops and rural meat counters across the South. These bones had just enough meat clinging to them to flavor a pot and provide some protein. You'd buy 2 or 3 pounds of neck bones, throw them in a big pot with water, onions, salt, pepper, and whatever seasonings you had, usually just basic spices. Simmer them low and slow for hours until the little bits of meat turned tender and fell off the bones, and the bones themselves released their collagen into the broth, making it thick and rich. The pot liquor that resulted was deeply flavorful, almost meaty sweet, with a silky texture from all that collagen. Serve it over rice, cheap white rice that soaked up all that flavorful broth. The meat you could pick off the bones was tender, fatty, and satisfying despite being scraps. This was Sunday dinner in many black households during the Depression and beyond. It was economical cooking elevated to an art form, taking the cheapest possible ingredient and transforming it into something that tasted like love. Oxtail stew. Before oxtail became a trendy restaurant ingredient costing $30 a pound, it was poor people's food, the tail of a cow that nobody wanted. Caribbean immigrants, Southern families, and anyone who understood nose-to-tail cooking knew oxtail made incredible stew. During the Depression and well into the 1970s, butchers practically gave it away. The tails were cut into rounds, each piece showing the cross-section of bone surrounded by meat, fat, and connective tissue. You'd brown them in a heavy pot, then add water or stock, onions, carrots if you had them, potatoes, and basic seasonings. The magic happened over hours of slow simmering. The collagen and fat from the oxtails melted into the broth, making it incredibly rich and silky. The meat became fall-off-the-bone tender, with a deep, beefy flavor, more intense than any steak. The bones added minerals and body to the stew, making it thick enough to coat a spoon. This was Saturday dinner that simmered all day, filling the house with an aroma that made neighbors jealous. You ate it with rice or bread to soak up every drop of that precious broth. It was inexpensive, filling, and actually delicious. One of those rare poverty meals that tasted like luxury. Beef tongue. Nothing says using the whole animal like beef tongue. Before it became a delicacy in tacos and fancy bistros, tongue was what poor families ate because nobody else wanted it. Jewish delis, Mexican families, and Southern cooks all had their tongue recipes, and during hard times, it showed up on tables across America. A whole beef tongue was massive, 3 to 4 pounds of solid muscle, and cost less than ground beef. The preparation took patience. Boil the tongue for hours until tender, then peel off the thick outer skin while it was still hot, revealing the pale, tender meat underneath. The texture was unlike any other meat, dense, smooth, almost buttery, with a mild beef flavor that took on whatever seasonings you used. Slice it thin and serve it cold in sandwiches with mustard and pickles. Braise it with onions and serve it hot with gravy. Mexican families made lengua tacos that were richly flavored and melt in your mouth tender. Jewish families served it for Sabbath dinner with horseradish. The tongue fed an entire family for multiple meals, and the cooking liquid became soup stock. Yes, it looked intimidating in its raw form, but once cooked and sliced, it was just tender, flavorful meat that happened to cost almost nothing. Hoppin' John, black-eyed peas and rice. New Year's Day in the South meant Hoppin' John. Black-eyed peas cooked with rice, onions, and whatever pork scraps you could afford. This West African-influenced dish became a staple of Southern poverty cooking because dried black-eyed peas were cheap, nutritious, and lasted forever in the pantry. The tradition said eating it on New Year's brought good luck and prosperity, something poor families desperately needed. Soak the dried black-eyed peas overnight, then cook them with a ham hock, bacon ends, or just some pork fat for flavor. Add onions, garlic if you had it, and plenty of black pepper. Cook until the peas were tender and creamy, having absorbed all that smoky pork flavor. Mix it with plain white rice, and you had a complete protein that kept you full for hours. The peas were earthy and slightly sweet. The rice absorbed all the pot liquor, and the bits of pork added richness. Sharecroppers, field workers, and anyone living paycheck to paycheck ate this regularly, not just on New Year's. It was filling, healthy, and cost pennies per serving. Some families added collard greens on the side. Others threw in tomatoes when available. It was survival food that became tradition. Beans and cornbread. The most iconic poor man's meal in American history. Beans and cornbread fed more families through hard times than any other combination. From Appalachia to Texas, from the Depression through today, this meal represents survival, simplicity, and surprising satisfaction. Dried pinto beans cost almost nothing. A pound fed a family for days. Soak them overnight, then simmer them with a piece of salt pork, bacon, or ham bone for flavor. Add onions, garlic, and seasonings. Cook them low and slow until they turned creamy, with some beans breaking down to thicken the pot liquor into a rich, savory sauce. The beans were earthy, slightly sweet, and deeply satisfying. Meanwhile, make cornbread from cornmeal, flour, a little sugar, buttermilk if you had it, regular milk if you didn't, and bacon grease. Bake it in a cast iron skillet until the edges crisped up and the top turned golden. Serve a bowl of beans with a thick wedge of cornbread on the side, or better yet, crumble the cornbread right into the beans, letting it soak up all that flavorful liquid. The combination provided complete protein, filled you up completely, and cost less than $1 to feed 6 people. It was comfort, it was tradition, and it was delicious despite its poverty origins. Dandelion greens. When you couldn't afford vegetables at the store, you foraged them from your yard. Dandelion greens were free food that grew everywhere. Lawns, roadsides, abandoned lots. Italian immigrants taught American families during the Depression that those weeds everyone tried to kill were actually nutritious, edible vegetables. You'd pick young dandelion leaves in early spring before they got too bitter, wash them thoroughly, and cook them like any other green. The most common method was Southern style. Boil them with a piece of salt pork or bacon until tender, seasoning with salt, pepper, and a splash of vinegar to cut the bitterness. The greens were dark, slightly bitter like arugula, with an earthy flavor that paired perfectly with fatty pork. Some families ate them raw in salads when the leaves were very young and mild. Others sautéed them with garlic and olive oil in Italian style. The bitterness took getting used to, but hunger made everything taste better. Families with no money for groceries could walk outside and pick dinner. Children were sent out with baskets to gather greens, while mothers cooked them for supper. It was foraging, it was free, and it provided vitamins and minerals when malnutrition was a real threat. Today, dandelion greens cost $5 a bunch at farmers markets. Poor people knew their value all along. Johnny Marzetti, named after the owner of a Columbus, Ohio restaurant. This casserole became Ohio's unofficial state dish during the 1970s. Spreading through church potlucks and school cafeterias across the Midwest, every Ohio grandmother had her version, and they'd fight you if you suggested theirs wasn't authentic. You'd cook egg noodles until tender, drain them, and set aside ground beef browned with onions and garlic, then mixed with tomato sauce, diced tomatoes, and Italian seasonings. The cooked noodles went into the meat sauce along with shredded cheddar cheese, creating an orange-red mixture that looked questionable, but tasted incredible. Everything baked together until the cheese melted into stretchy strings and the edges crisped up brown. This represented regional pride in an era when American food was becoming homogenized, while fast food chains spread across the country serving identical meals. Johnny Marzetti remained defiantly local. You couldn't get it at McDonald's or find it in California. It was Ohio's food, born from Italian immigrants adapting to Midwestern ingredients, perfected by church ladies who knew how to feed 200 people on a tight budget. Ground beef shepherd's pie. Technically, using beef made this cottage pie. Not shepherd's pie, but American cooks didn't care about British distinctions. This became the ultimate comfort food casserole. Meat and vegetables covered with mashed potatoes and baked until golden. Every mother had her version, passed down and modified through generations. Ground beef browned with onions, then mixed with frozen peas, carrots, and corn. Some added Worcestershire sauce and beef gravy for richness. Others kept it simple with just the meat juices. This base spread into a casserole dish, then topped with mashed potatoes whipped with butter and milk until fluffy. Using a fork, you'd create decorative ridges in the potato topping. Those ridges would brown beautifully in the oven, creating crispy peaks while the valleys stayed creamy. This meant using leftovers brilliantly. Monday's mashed potatoes became Wednesday's dinner topping. The dish worked equally well with leftover pot roast, ground up or fresh beef. During economic uncertainty, nothing went to waste, and shepherd's pie proved leftovers could be more exciting than the original meal. It was thrifty cooking disguised as comfort food, budget consciousness wrapped in nostalgic flavor. Spoon bread with ground beef. Southern spoon bread met ground beef in this fusion that brought comfort food to casserole form. Spoon bread, basically soft cornbread with a pudding-like texture, traditionally served as a side dish. But 1970s cooks made it a main course by adding seasoned ground beef throughout. Ground beef browned with onions and bell peppers, seasoned with chili powder and cumin. Separately, you'd make spoon bread batter. Cornmeal cooked in milk until thick, then eggs, butter, baking powder, and sometimes creamed corn added for extra moisture. The beef mixture folded into the batter, everything poured into a greased dish, and baked until puffed and golden with a crispy top and custardy interior. This represented Southern ingenuity, spreading nationwide. As families relocated for work during the 1970s economic shifts, regional recipes traveled with them. Northerners discovered spoon bread, Southerners learned about hot dish, and American cuisine became truly national rather than regional. This dish also showed how cornmeal, cheaper than wheat flour, could create substantial meals. It was budget cooking with soul, proving poverty food didn't have to taste poor when made with skill and love. Poor man's Swiss steak. Real Swiss steak used round steak pounded thin and braised for hours. Poor man's version used ground beef formed into patties, achieving similar results for a fraction of the cost. This emerged during the 1974 recession, when beef prices hit record highs and families needed alternatives to expensive cuts. Ground beef, mixed with breadcrumbs, egg, and seasonings formed into thick patties that you'd brown in a skillet until crusty outside but still pink inside. Remove the patties, then make gravy in the same pan using flour, beef broth, and tomato sauce. The patties return to the gravy, along with sliced onions and bell peppers. Then, everything simmered for 30 minutes until the patties were tender and the gravy thick enough to coat a spoon. This meant pride despite poverty. You could serve steak even when you couldn't afford steak. The name acknowledged the substitution without shame. Poor man's version, yes, but still delicious and satisfying. It represented American resilience during economic hardship, the refusal to let circumstances dictate quality of life. Families gathered around these beef patties smothered in gravy, pretending they were eating something fancy, while knowing they'd made something from nothing. Dutch oven, meatballs with crackers. These weren't Italian grandma's meatballs. These were American camp cooking, adapted for suburban kitchens. The recipe came from Boy Scout camping guides and spread when fathers came home and requested, "Those meatballs we made at camp." Ground beef mixed with crushed saltine crackers instead of breadcrumbs. Egg, milk, and seasonings rolled into large meatballs. These browned in a Dutch oven. Then onion soup mix, always Lipton, mixed with water created instant gravy. The meatballs simmered in this gravy for an hour until tender, the crackers making them lighter than traditional meatballs, almost fluffy inside, served over egg noodles with extra gravy. This represented masculine cooking entering the home kitchen. Fathers who'd never cooked suddenly had one dish they could make, learned in the woods but translated to the stovetop. The use of onion soup mix, considered lazy by gourmet standards, was embraced without apology. It worked, tasted good, and required minimal skill. These meatballs meant fathers contributing to dinner, even if just occasionally, marking a small shift in kitchen gender dynamics during a decade of changing social roles.